Domingo died at 7:30 on Thursday morning, when the first rays of the sun barely touched the windows of our third-floor bedroom. I sat beside his bed for the third night in a row, listening to his intermittent breathing. Over the 2 years of his illness, I'd grown accustomed to the sounds at first frightening, then familiar, like the ticking of an old clock in the living room. When the breathing stopped, I didn't even realize it right away. There was a silence that hadn't been in our house in a long time. I sat there for another 10 minutes, holding his hand. It was warm, but lifeless. Domingo lay with his eyes closed, and for the first time in months there was no suffering on his face. The illness had receded, leaving behind only peace. I fixed his hair, kissed his forehead, and only then went to call Dr. Herrera. "Doctor, this is Estefania Valdivia. Domingo, he's gone." "I'll be there in half an hour," he answered briefly. During his years as a doctor, he had learned to understand such calls half-heartedly. While waiting for the doctor, I went down to the kitchen and brewed coffee. My hands were shaking, although my husband's death was not unexpected. Stomach cancer had left no hope for a year and a half. For the last few months, we had just been waiting for the end. But there was a gulf between expectation and reality that was impossible to foresee. Dr. Herrera arrived exactly half an hour after my call. He examined Domingo, shook his head, and began filling out paperwork. We'd known each other for over 30 years. He'd delivered Oswaldo when he was born, treated my husband for everything from colds to hypertension. Now he's pronounced him dead. "Estefania, he didn't suffer," the doctor said, putting the documents in a folder. "His heart simply stopped in his sleep. That's the best outcome with this diagnosis." "I know," I replied. "Thank you for coming all these months, even when it was clear that nothing could be changed." "You need to call your son," he said softly, putting the stethoscope in his bag. "And the funeral home. Would you like me to make the call myself?" I shook my head. That's the kind of thing I should do myself. The doctor left, and I was alone in the house with my husband's body. It was a strange feeling to know that the man you'd lived with for 35 years was one floor up, but he was gone. The house seemed simultaneously empty and full of his presence. Oswaldo arrived an hour later, red-eyed and with a wrinkled shirt. It was obvious he had dressed in a hurry. When I opened the door, he just hugged me and cried. My 38-year-old son cried like a baby, and I stroked his head like I'd done years before when he fell off his bike or fought with his friends. "Mommy," he sobbed, "how did this happen? Yesterday he was still talking to us on the phone." "His heart gave out," I explained. "He fought as hard as he could, but his body was too weak." Amelia showed up 20 minutes after her son, neatly combed and wearing a black dress that she seemed to have prepared in advance for the occasion. She was carrying a large bag with documents and a notebook. "Aunt Estefania." She hugged me gently, trying not to wrinkle the dress. "Please accept my condolences. Uncle Domingo was a wonderful man." They went upstairs to say goodbye to their father. Osvaldo stood by the bedside for a long time, holding his father's hand and whispering something in his ear. Amelia stood for a minute at the foot of the bed, crossed herself, and went out into the corridor. "You mustn't think about anything right now," she said to me on the stairs. "We'll organize everything. I've got the number of a good funeral home. I've already checked the rates, and they did organize." Amelia was surprisingly efficient, calling the funeral home, ordering flowers, making lists of who needed to be notified. She took a notebook out of her bag and began to write down relatives, friends, neighbors, former employees of the store. Osvaldo was more silent and smoked on the balcony, something he did only in stressful situations. I did not disturb them. After 2 years of constant care for my husband, I felt like a squeezed lemon. "Aunt Estefania, where was Uncle's paperwork?" Amelia asked. "Passport? Marriage certificate, will?" "In the safe, in the office on the second floor," I answered. "The key is in the box on the dressing table." She nodded and wrote it down in her notebook. Then she asked about insurance, bank accounts, if I had any debts. The questions were proper and businesslike, but I felt uncomfortable with such practicality on the day my husband died. "Amelia, can't this wait?" Osvaldo said quietly. "No, dear, it's better to find out right away," his wife replied. "It will be more difficult to sort things out later." The funeral was scheduled for Saturday. Domingo lay in the coffin in our living room, a large room on the first floor with high ceilings and heavy dark wood furniture. He had bought this set back in the 80s, when things were going particularly well at the store. It seemed then that we would live in this house forever, raising grandchildren, meeting old age surrounded by family. The coffin was placed against the far wall where the old chest of drawers with photographs used to stand. Amelia offered to remove the family photos so they wouldn't get in the way, but I refused. Let Domingo see the faces of those he loved. Our wedding photos, Osvaldo's baby pictures, trips to the sea together. Guests started arriving from Friday morning. Neighbors, former store employees, old friends, many I hadn't seen in years. Everyone said the same thing. What a good man Domingo was, what a pity it was so early, how hard it would be for me without him. I nodded and thanked, though the words seemed empty. My husband's death was not a sudden blow, but the logical conclusion of a long illness. I had been preparing for it for 2 years, but readiness was an illusion. Mrs. Castillo from next door brought a pot of soup and a box of cookies. "Estefania, dear, you must eat," she said, stroking my arm. "Domingo would not forgive you if you lost your health because of him." Don Carlos, who ran a shop on a neighboring street, told me at length how she and her husband had helped each other in difficult times when the economy was in crisis. "Domingo never complained," he said. "Even when things were bad, he found ways to help others. Genaro was one of the first to arrive and immediately took care of the food and drinks. We've been friends for over 40 years. We met when I was young, when I first married Domingo. She had never been married, lived alone all her life, worked as a home seamstress, and didn't really regret it. 'Men only bring headaches,' she liked to say, 'and I am free as a bird,' but to Domingo treated with sincere warmth. He was always interested in her affairs, helped with the purchase of a sewing machine when the old one broke down. 'Don't think about anything now,' she whispered to me, pouring coffee into cups. 'Just get through the day.' By Friday night, the house was filled with people. Osvaldo and Amelia swirled among the guests, accepting condolences, talking about their father's last days. They held hands and said the right words. Amelia was especially diligent, approaching elderly women, asking about their health, inquiring about their families. Several times I heard the guests praise my daughter-in-law, how well-mannered, how caring, how lucky Osvaldo was to have a wife. "Such a smart girl," said a neighbor, Senora Gomez, "and educated, she works at the university. It's rare to find such wives these days." Amelia smiled and lowered her eyes modestly. She knew how to make a good impression. There was no denying it. On Saturday morning, the real rush began. People came in families, with children, bringing wreaths and flowers. The house had become a thoroughfare. Genaro commanded in the kitchen, neighbors helped set the tables, men smoked in the yard and talked quietly about business. Old Ramirez, who had been a clerk at our store for 20 years, arrived with his wife and 3 sons. He wept as he approached the coffin. There was no better boss, he told anyone who was willing to listen. He never raised his voice, always paid fairly. When his wife fell ill, he offered to help with her treatment. Neighbor Don Arturo, an elderly retired teacher, recalled how Domingo lent him money for his wife's surgery and did not hurry with the return. He said, "Pay back when you can, but in the meantime treat Marta," said Don Arturo. And indeed, he waited 3 years until I was able to repay the debt. By 11 o'clock in the morning, there were more than 50 people in the house. The living room had become a sea of flowers and wreaths. The priest, Father Miguel, arrived early and had a long talk with me about Domingo, about faith, about how death is not the end, but a passage to another life. After the funeral service at the church in San Francisco, we drove to the cemetery. The procession stretched for several blocks. The coffin was carried in a hearse, followed by cars with relatives and friends. Domingo was buried next to his parents in the family vault he had bought 10 years earlier. Amelia held my hand and made sure I didn't trip on the uneven paths between the graves. Osvaldo carried a wreath from our family and was silent. When the coffin was lowered into the ground, I cried for the first time in days. Before there had been only tears of fatigue and relief, but now I realized that my husband was gone and would never be. Genaro put her arms around me, and we stood like that while the priest read the last prayers. The wake was held at home. Genaro had been cooking since morning, baked chicken, made salads, baked pies. Neighbors brought their own treats. The large dining room table was bursting with food that no one ate much of. People drank more and remembered Domingo. Conversations were leisurely with long pauses. Stories from her husband's life were told. Memories of joint endeavors were shared. Gradually, the conversations turned to the usual topics: food prices, politics, weather. Life took its toll, even on the day of the funeral. "Remember how Domingo helped organize the fundraiser when the Moreno family's house burned down?" Senora Vasquez told me. "He was the first to donate, and then he went around to all the vendors in the market. And how he gave presents to the children from the orphanage every year at Christmas," added another neighbor. "He never told us about it. We found out by chance. I heard such stories all day long. It turns out that my husband did a lot of good deeds that I did not even know about. It was his manner, to help quietly, without bragging and without expecting gratitude." Toward evening, the guests began to disperse. Osvaldo and Amelia were the last to leave, helping to clear the table and wash the dishes. Genaro wasn't in a hurry either. She knew I didn't want to be alone on the first day after the funeral. "Aunt Estefania," Amelia wiped the plates with a kitchen towel, "would you like us to stay the night? You'll be lonely in this big house." I shook my head. Loneliness didn't frighten me. In the 2 years of my husband's illness, I'd grown accustomed to silence and empty rooms. "Thank you, dear, but I can manage. Genaro will stay if I need him." "Of course I'll stay," she said, putting the clean plates in the cupboard. "I don't need to sew tomorrow." Amelia looked thoughtfully around the kitchen, then went into the dining room and living room. She walked around the rooms slowly, as if assessing their size and furnishings. "This is a really big house," she said casually, returning to the kitchen. 3 stories, 7 rooms. That's a lot for one person, don't you think?" Osvaldo gave his wife a warning glance, but she paid no attention. "I mean, it's not an easy place to maintain. Heating in winter, cleaning, repairing, it all takes effort and money. And you, Aunt Estefania, need to take care of yourself, especially now." "I haven't thought about it yet," I answered honestly. It was too early for such talk. Of course," Amelia agreed hastily. "I just wanted to say that if you ever decide to make a change, we can help. There are very nice small apartments in the new neighborhoods, modern, comfortable, close to stores and the clinic. Much more practical for an elderly person." Genaro put the cup on the table loudly. She always knew how to express herself without words. Her face said everything she thought about such conversations on the day of the funeral. "Amelia is right," Osvaldo intervened uncertainly. "But Mama will decide for herself when she is ready to think about it." "Well, yes, of course," Amelia agreed. "Just know that we're ready to help with the move when needed. Osvaldo can take a vacation, and we'll find good movers." They left around 10 p.m. Amelia once again offered to stay, hugged me, and whispered something about time heals all wounds. After they left, Genaro made herbal tea and we sat down in the kitchen, the coziest room of the house. "She was quick to talk about moving," she said, stirring the sugar in her cup. "People grieve differently," I replied. "Maybe she thinks it's better for me." "Maybe," Genaro agreed, but I could hear the doubt in her voice. "It's just weird, talking about apartments on the day of the funeral." We drank tea and went to our rooms. Genaro settled into the guest bedroom on the 2nd floor, and I went up to my bedroom. For the first time in 2 years, the bed felt too big and empty. Domingo was no longer lying next to me, breathing heavily in his sleep, asking for water in the middle of the night. I couldn't sleep for a long time, thinking about Amelia's words. Maybe she was right. The house is really big for one woman. 7 rooms, 3 floors, a big yard with a garden, lots of room for memories, but also lots of emptiness. But it was our house, the house where we lived for 30 years, raised our son, received guests, experienced joys and sorrows. Every room held memories, every corner was saturated with our shared life. In the bedroom was the old dresser Domingo had bought me for our 5th wedding anniversary. His glasses still rested on it, and there was a cup of unfinished tea. His clothes hung in the closet, suits, shirts, sweaters. It all needed to be sorted out. but I couldn't do it. As I fell asleep, I listened to the floorboards creaking in the hallway. The old house lived its own life, breathing and whispering something in the night wind. Tomorrow, a new life would begin without Domingo, but I wasn't ready to think about what it would be. The 2 weeks after the funeral passed in a strange emptiness. For the first few days, I just existed, getting up in the morning, making coffee, cleaning the house, cooking meals I hardly ate. Renato came by every day, brought fresh bread or soup, sat with me in the kitchen, and told me the news. Neighbors visited too, but less and less often. Life was getting back to normal, and mine remained frozen in the day my husband died. The house seemed huge and empty. Rooms that used to be filled with the sounds of Domingo's illness, his coughs, his moans, his pleas for water, were now silent. The silence pressed harder than the earlier suffering. At least then I had a purpose. To nurse, to heal, to ease the pain. Now there was no purpose. Osvaldo called every day, inquiring about my well-being, offering to come over. I refused. I didn't want my son to see me like this. Amelia called too, but less often, usually to ask about documents or banking matters. She helped with inheritance, insurance, survivors' pensions. By the end of the second week, I started to come to my senses. I sorted through Domingo's things, gave some of them to neighbors in need, and kept some as a memento. Tidied up his office on the second floor, where he conducted the business of the store before his illness. I began to leave the house little by little, to the store, to the pharmacy, to the market. Sunday, the third Sunday after my husband's death, was sunny and warm. I sat in the garden, weeding the beds of vegetables that Domingo had planted. The work was soothing, bringing back a sense of normalcy. About 2:00 in the afternoon, Osvaldo and Amelia arrived. His son looked better than at the funeral. His face was fresher, the circles under his eyes had disappeared. Amelia was in a light-colored dress and heeled shoes, clearly not going to work in the garden. "Mommy, how are you?" Osvaldo hugged me, getting dirty in the soil from my hands. "You're looking better." "I'm slowly recovering," I replied. "Would you like some tea? Or coffee?" "Let's go inside," Amelia suggested. "It's hot in the sun and we need to talk." We went up to the terrace and sat down at a table under the awning. Amelia took out of her bag a notebook and a pen, a teacher's habit, to write everything down. "Aunt Estefania, Osvaldo and I have thought a lot about your situation," she began without preamble, "and we've come to the conclusion that you need to change your lifestyle." "In what way?" I asked, though I knew where this was going. "This house is too big for one person," Amelia said confidently, as if she were giving a lecture to students. 7 rooms, 3 stories, a lot of land. You wouldn't be physically able to maintain it all." Osvaldo nodded, but remained silent. It was obvious that the initiative belongs to his wife, and he just supports. "We found several apartments in the new neighborhood," Amelia continued, flipping through her notebook. 1-bedroom apartments, on the first or second floor, near the clinic, stores, bus stop. Very convenient for an elderly person." "I'm not elderly, I'm 62, I objected. Of course, Amelia agreed hastily. "It's just that at your age you have to think about practicality. A small apartment means less cleaning, less heating costs, fewer repair problems." She opened her notebook and began to read the figures. The cost of utilities, in a big house versus an apartment, the cost of maintaining the lot, the price of roof repairs and window replacements. Everything was calculated and written down in neat teacher's handwriting. "Look," Amelia showed me a page of calculations. "You'll save more than 200,000 pesos on heating alone in the winter. And then there's water, electricity, property taxes." "I have the money," I said. "Domingo left enough to live comfortably." "It's not just money," Osvaldo interjected. "Mom, you know it's not safe to be alone in a house like this. If something happens at night, who will help? The neighbors are far away and we don't live close by either." It was a strong argument and Amelia picked it up immediately. "Exactly. And in an apartment building there are always people around. The concierge, the neighbors, the manager. If things get bad, help will come quickly." She turned to her notebook again and read out a list of advantages of the small apartment. proximity to medical facilities, convenient layout, modern communications, elevator, parking, security. We've already talked to the realtor, Amelia added. This house can be sold very favorably. The neighborhood is prestigious, the plot is large, the house is in good condition. With the proceeds, you could buy a nice apartment and still have a decent amount of money left over. Which you can put in the bank at interest, Osvaldo added. An extra income for retirement. I listened to their arguments and felt a growing irritation. Everything was reasonable and practical, but they were talking about my house as if it were a commodity on the market. The house where half of my life had passed, where their son and grandson had been born and raised. What about the memories? I asked. Your father bought this house when we were in our 30s. Everything here is imbued with our life together. Memories are in the heart, not in the walls, Amelia said admonishingly. Besides, you're not going to live in the past, are you? You have to think of the future, of comfort, of security. Osvaldo put his hand on my shoulder. Mom, we're not forcing you. We just want you to be better. You know you have to make wise decisions in your situation. My situation? I questioned. What does that mean? Well, you're a widow, alone, old, my son explained awkwardly. You have to be realistic. Amelia nodded and turned back to her notebook. We've drawn up a plan for the move. If you agree, we can have everything finalized by the end of the month. Osvaldo will take a vacation, help with the packing. I'll find good movers, organize the transportation of the furniture. What furniture? I asked. Well, not all the furniture can be moved into a one-bedroom apartment, Amelia explained. You'll have to pick out the essentials. The rest could be sold or donated. She made it sound as easy as throwing away old newspapers. But every object in the house had a story. The dining room table where we met for all the holidays, the armchair in the living room where Domingo read the newspapers in the evenings, the closet in the bedroom that we chose together at the furniture store. You've already decided everything without me, I said. Not at all, Aunt Estefania, Amelia said hastily. We were just preparing the options. The final decision, of course, is yours. But I could hear the certainty in her tone that I would agree, as if my agreement was just a formality. What if I don't want to move? I asked bluntly. Amelia and Osvaldo looked at each other. It was obvious that they hadn't considered it. Mom, that's not wise, my son said. We've explained all the advantages. Advantages for whom? I asked. For me or for you? For you, of course, Amelia assured me. We have your best interests at heart. Then take my withdrawal. I'm not moving anywhere. There was an awkward silence. Amelia fidgeted nervously with her pen. Osvaldo looked away. Maybe you should think about it some more, Amelia suggested. There's no need to make a hasty decision. It's not a hasty decision, I said firmly. This is my house, and I will live in it. Amelia closed the notebook with visible disappointment. All right, she said coldly. But when you realize we're right, don't say we didn't warn you. Osvaldo tried to soften the situation. Mom, we're just worried about you. If you change your mind, we'll help with the move anytime. They left half an hour later, leaving a sheet on the table with apartment addresses and realtor phone numbers. I threw it in the garbage as soon as the gate closed behind them. After they left, I sat on the terrace for a long time, trying to figure out my feelings. On the one hand, their arguments were reasonable. The house was really big, and it was not easy to maintain it alone. On the other hand, something about Amelia's behavior was alarming. She was too insistent on moving, too detailed about the financial side of things. Toward evening, I decided to talk to Genaro. A friend was the only person I could trust completely. Genaro lived in a small house on the outskirts of town, in a neighborhood where artisans lived. The house was tiny compared to mine, but it was cozy and neat. There was a sewing machine in the living room and cuts of fabric and patterns on the table. Come in, dear, my friend greeted me. I was just making tea. We sat down in her small kitchen at an old table that Genaro had bought 20 years ago at a flea market. Tell me what happened, she said, pouring the tea into cups. I could tell by the look on her face that something was wrong. I told her about Osvaldo and Amelia's visit, their offer to move, the calculations in the notebook, and the plans to sell the house. And what did you say? Genaro asked. I flatly refused. Her friend nodded approvingly. She did the right thing, but I don't like this story. What's that? Too quickly they started talking about moving. The husband's still in the ground and they're already making plans. Genaro took a sip of tea and looked thoughtfully out the window. Estefania, are you sure they have your best interests at heart? What do you mean? Well, this house isn't cheap. Downtown, big lot, nice neighborhood. How much could it be worth? I gave you a ballpark figure from the insurance appraiser a year ago. Genaro whistled. That's not bad money. And if you sold it and bought a small apartment, how much would you have left? More than half. Exactly, said her friend significantly. Who is the heir to that money? I understood what she was getting at, but I didn't want to believe it. Genaro, you don't think they're... I don't think anything. I'm just asking. Who will receive your inheritance? Osvaldo, of course. He's the only son, which means his wife. And the less money you spend on yourself, the more they'll get. The thought was unpleasant, but logical. If I live in a small apartment and save money, my son will have more money when I die. I don't want to think about it, I said. You shouldn't, said Genaro. You have to think about it, especially about Amelia. What do you have against her? Nothing in particular. I just don't like her. Too calculating, too practical. Besides, is it normal to talk about moving and apartments on the day of a funeral? I remembered Amelia looking around the house after the wake, asking about papers and bank accounts. Maybe she just wants to help, I said uncertainly. Maybe, Genaro agreed. Maybe she doesn't. Either way, you make your own decisions. It's your house, your life, your money. We sat there until late afternoon, drinking tea and talking about the past, about Domingo, about how quickly life changes. Genaro didn't give advice, just listened and supported. It was exactly what I needed. As I walked back home, I thought about my friend's words. Was Amelia really thinking about money and not my well-being? Was this whole show of caring and calculation just a way to get me to sell the house? At home, I went up to my bedroom and stared out the window at the familiar streets for a long time. It was a view I'd seen every morning for over 30 years. The neighbor's house where the children grew up, who were now parents themselves. The old oak tree in the yard that Domingo and I had planted the first year we lived here. The fence he painted every spring. It was all part of me, part of my story. And no one would make me give it up, not even my own son and his practical wife. It had been a week since the unpleasant conversation about moving, and I felt uneasy. Osvaldo was my only son, after all, and I didn't want there to be a rift between us. Maybe I'd overreacted to their proposal. Maybe they were really worried about me, and I mistook their concern for something else. Tuesday morning, I decided to bake an apple pie and drive over to their house. It had been Osvaldo's favorite dessert since he was a kid. I made it for all of his birthdays into adulthood. The recipe was inherited from my mother-in-law. Simple, but time-tested. I chose the apples at the market especially carefully. Firm, sweet, and sour, without wormholes. Senora Moreno, a merchant who had known me for many years, put aside the best ones. "Are you baking for your grandson?" she asked, putting the apples in the bag. "For my son," I replied. "I want to please him." At home, I spent the whole morning cooking. I kneaded the dough with my hands, as my mother-in-law had taught me, so it turns out more tender. I cut apples into thin slices, sprinkled with cinnamon and sugar. In the oven, the pie rose and turned golden, filling the kitchen with homemade flavor. While the pie was cooling, I was getting ready for the road. I put on my best dress, the dark blue one that Domingo called dressy. I combed my hair, put on a little makeup. I wanted to look good so Osvaldo wouldn't worry about my condition. Osvaldo and Amelia lived in a new neighborhood on Arturo Prat Street, in a 2-story house they had bought 3 years ago. The house was modern, with large windows and a neat garden. It seemed a little impersonal to me, too proper, without the warmth that years of living give. The bus ride took almost half an hour. I sat with the pie on my lap, wrapped in a clean towel, and rehearsed the words of reconciliation. I wanted to say that I understood their concern, that I wasn't angry, that we were family and should support each other. At the bus stop near their house, I got out and walked slowly down Arturo Prat Street. The day was warm, and many houses stood with open windows. The sounds of everyday life could be heard, Televisions, children's laughter, dogs barking. I recognized my son's house from afar, number 23, with a red roof and white shutters. The gate was open, and the roses Amelia had planted last year were blooming in the garden. Oswaldo's car was out of sight, but that didn't matter. He could have put it in the garage. As I approached the house, I heard voices coming from the kitchen. The window was wide open, and I could hear the conversation clearly. The first one I recognized was Amelia's voice, sharp, disgruntled. "I told you we should have acted right after the funeral," she said irritably. While she was in shock, she would have agreed to anything. But she clearly said no. Osvaldo objected. What could I do? I could have insisted. I could have explained that she had no choice. The old woman is stubborn, but not stupid. She would have realized that it was better for everyone. I froze at the gate. Old woman? Amelia said, old woman about me? Amelia, don't talk about your mother that way, Osvaldo protested weakly. How else should I speak of her? Replied the wife angrily. She behaves like an old woman who doesn't understand reality. She lives in a house she can't afford, stubborn as a donkey. I stood there holding the cake to my chest and couldn't believe what I was hearing. Did Amelia really think that of me? She can afford the house, Osvaldo said. Father left enough money. He still has. Amelia spoke louder and louder, apparently getting hotter. What will it be in 5 years? 10 years from now? The money will run out, the house will fall apart, and we'll be left to fend for ourselves. I don't think... You don't think at all, Amelia interrupted him. That's why you're still just a manager at the bank, not the head of the department. You don't know how to make decisions. This low blow silenced Oswaldo. I knew that my son was worried about his slow career development, that he didn't think he was successful enough. Your mother won't live forever, Amelia continued in a calmer tone. And when she dies, what do we get? A broken-down house that can't be sold? Or a pile of debts for repairs and utilities? I don't know, Osvaldo muttered. Maybe she's right, and we should leave her alone. Leave her alone? Amelia was indignant. Osvaldo, do you realize how much money we are talking about? This house is worth over 400 million pesos. If we sold it now and bought a decent apartment, we'd have 300 million net. The number sounded like a blow. I didn't realize the house had gone up so much in the last few years. So what's next? Osvaldo asked. Then the money goes into the bank and earns interest, or invested in real estate. And when your mother dies, we get everything at once, not ruins. That sounds awful, the son muttered, like we're waiting for her to die. We're not waiting, Amelia replied coldly. We are planning for the future. Your mother is 62 years old. She has blood pressure problems. She's been through stress. How long will she live? 10 years, 15 at the most. That was a slap in the face. Amelia spoke of my death as a business matter to be factored into the financial calculations. And all those years the money would just sit there dead weight? She continued. And you could use it to buy a big house, to renovate, to invest in your children's education. What children? Osvaldo was surprised. We don't have children. Not yet. But if we have enough money, we can think about having a family. So they're even planning children on my money, I thought bitterly. But my mother refused to move, Osvaldo reminded me. What can we do? We can force her, Amelia said confidently. There are different ways. What kind of ways? Well, for example, guardianship. If you prove that the person can't make decisions for himself, the court will appoint a guardian. The mother is perfectly sane, Osvaldo objected. No one would believe she's incompetent. Who says she's incompetent? Amelia's voice had a sly note in it. There are different forms of guardianship. For example, for health reasons. She's healthy. As long as she's healthy. But what if she gets sick? Depression after her husband's death, memory problems, inability to care for herself. Amelia, are you suggesting I lie on the stand? I'm suggesting we help your mother, even if she doesn't realize it. I know a lawyer, Rodriguez, who specializes in these cases. He says if you're smart, you can get limited custody. What does that mean? It means the guardian makes decisions on major transactions, real estate sales, bank accounts, and the old woman remains technically competent. Amelia explained it calmly, like a math lesson, as if it wasn't about taking away my rights but about solving a problem. "And who will be the guardian?" Osvaldo asked. "You, of course. An only son, caring, with a steady job. The court will gladly appoint you guardian. And if the mother doesn't want to? Who's going to ask her?" Amelia laughed. "Rodriguez says that the ward's opinion is taken into account, but is not decisive, especially if there are medical reports." "What medical reports? She doesn't have any diagnoses." "There will be. Depression, age-related mental changes. There'll be a doctor who'll write what she needs. I've been listening to this conversation like a bad dream. Are they really planning to take away my right to dispose of my property?" "I don't know, Amelia," Osvaldo said uncertainly. "It doesn't seem fair." "Unfair?" His wife was indignant. "Is it fair to let an old woman squander the money that should go to our children? Is it fair to watch her live alone in a huge house, risking her health? Maybe she's right, and we should leave her alone." "Osvaldo!" Amelia cut him short. "Are you a man or a wimp? Your mother is aging, losing her mind, living in unreality, and you're suggesting we wait for her to do something stupid?" "She's not losing her mind." "Yes, she is. Would a normal person give up a comfortable apartment for an old house? Would a normal person live alone in 7 rooms? Amelia spoke more and more confidently, as if convincing not only her husband, but herself in the correctness of her plans. "Listen to what I'll tell you," she continued. "In a month we will go to your mother again. I'll talk to her seriously, explain the situation. If she agrees to move, good. If not, we'll go to Rodriguez. And if the lawyer doesn't help, he will, for a price. The key is to act decisively and not give the old woman time to think." I couldn't listen anymore. My legs were shaking, my heart was beating so loudly that I thought I could hear it all along the street. Turning around, I walked quickly away from the house, clutching the pie to my chest, which now seemed like a mockery. At the bus stop, I had to wait almost 20 minutes for the bus. I sat on a bench, and the words I had heard rolled around in my head. "The old woman is stubborn. The money is dead weight. There will be a doctor who will write what is necessary." Each phrase was like a knife in the back. On the bus, I stared out the window and tried to figure out what to do next. Osvaldo, my only son, whom I gave birth to and raised, agrees to take away my right to control my own life, and his wife is planning it as a business transaction. When I got home, I threw the pie in the trash. I couldn't eat it. It reminded me of the naive hope of reconciliation. Then I sat in Domingo's chair in the living room for a long time, looking at the pictures on the wall. One of them showed Osvaldo at 5 years old, smiling, with ice cream in his hand. It was hard to believe that that joyful boy had grown into a man ready to betray his own mother. By late afternoon, I decided I needed to tell Genaro about everything. My friend was the only person I could trust. She always gave sound advice and was not afraid to tell the truth, no matter how unpleasant it might be. That evening, I went to Genaro's house. My friend met me on the doorstep and immediately realized that something serious had happened. "I could tell by the look on her face that it was bad news," she said, letting me into the house. "Come in, tell me over tea." We sat down in her small kitchen, and I told her everything I had heard under the window of her son's house. I told it slowly, trying not to leave out a single detail: the dismissive old woman, the calculations for selling the house, and the plans for guardianship through a lawyer I knew. Genaro listened in silence, only occasionally shaking her head. When I finished, she sat in silence for a long time, twirling her cup in her hands. Okay, she said at last. "I was right when I said that your sister-in-law was not thinking of your welfare." "What should I do, Genaro?" I asked. "They're going to take everything away from me. They're going to take it away, but they don't know if they can," she said. "You can't just get a guardianship. You need a good reason." Amelia said that there will be a doctor who will write the necessary report. "If you pay for it," agreed Genaro. "But you're not going to sit around and do nothing, are you? What can I do?" Her friend got up and walked around the kitchen, as she always did when she was thinking about an important decision. "Estefania, you have to get ahead of them. If they want your house, don't give them the opportunity." "How?" "Sell it yourself, before they can do anything about it." It was a simple and logical idea, but it took my breath away. Sell the house? But it's our home. It's where my whole life is. Darling, Hinaro said softly, sitting down beside her. The house is the walls and the roof, and your life is in your head and your heart. No one can take it away. But where am I going to move to? You'll buy a smaller apartment, in the same neighborhood if you want, and put the rest of the money in the bank in your own name. Then neither your son nor daughter-in-law can tell you how to live your life. We sat up late into the night discussing the details. Hinaro convinced me that it was the only way to remain independent. Gradually, I began to realize that she was right. The main thing is to act quickly, she said, while they think you know nothing about their plans. The next morning, I went to a real estate agency, which was located in the center of the city. The realtor, a young man named Carlos Figueroa, listened carefully to my demands. A 7-room house on O'Higgins Street, he clarified, writing down the address. Great neighborhood, nice property. I don't think I'll have any trouble selling it. He came to see the house the same day. He walked through the rooms, took measurements, took pictures. He especially scrutinized the kitchen and bathrooms. He said that buyers pay special attention to it. The house is in excellent condition, he concluded. Your husband did a good job on the renovations. I'll appraise it at 450 million pesos. The figure was even higher than the one Amelia had quoted. Apparently, the real estate market continued to rise. How fast can you sell it? I asked. At that price and in that condition, 2 weeks. 3 weeks at the most. There's a big demand for houses in the center right now. We signed a service contract, and Carlos promised to place ads in newspapers and on the internet tomorrow. The first buyers showed up 3 days later. A young couple with 2 children. He worked as an engineer. She was a teacher. They liked the house immediately, especially the large garden in proximity to schools. We've been looking for something like this for a long time, the woman said, looking at the children's rooms on the 2nd floor. The children will have plenty of space here. They didn't bargain hard, knocking down the price by only 10 million. A week later, we signed a preliminary sales contract. While the sale documents were being processed, I started looking for a new place to live. I wanted to stay in the same neighborhood, close to the places I was used to and to Hinaro. The realtor showed me several options, 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom apartments in different buildings. I chose a 2-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a 5-story building on Boln Street, a 10-minute walk from the old place. The apartment was bright, with a balcony and a view of the courtyard. My bed and dresser fit in the bedroom, and the living room had a sofa, an armchair, and a TV. The kitchen was small, but adequate for 1 person. The sale of the house was finalized 2 weeks after the first visit of the buyers. The procedure was accelerated by the fact that the new owners paid in cash. They had sold their apartment in the capital and were moving to our city because of my husband's work. On the day the final contract was signed, I received 440 million pesos. The apartment was worth 120 million, 10 more for the realtor's services and paperwork. I deposited the remaining 310 million in a bank account at 12% interest. The move took only 1 day. I took only the most necessary things and furniture, a bed, a dresser, a Domingo chair, a dining table. I left the rest to the new owners at their request. They liked the house. Hinaro helped pack personal belongings, photos, documents, books, dishes. They worked in silence, both realizing that it was the end of an era. Don't be sad, her friend said, wrapping the family photos in paper. You did the right thing. Now you are free. By evening, everything was ready. I walked around the empty rooms, saying goodbye to the house. The bedroom still smelled of Domingo's perfume, his business files on the shelves in the study. Every corner reminded me of the years I'd lived here, but sadness was mixed with relief. I had done what needed to be done. Now no one could force me to live by someone else's rules. The next day, I called Osvaldo at work. I wanted to break the news myself, not wait for him to hear it from the neighbors. Osvaldo, it's Mom. I have something to tell you. Mom, hi. He was obviously busy, with voices and keyboard tapping. What's wrong? I sold the house. There was a long silence. Then Osvaldo asked again, as if he hadn't heard. What did you say? I sold the house on O'Higgins Street. Yesterday I signed the contract and received the money. Mom, that's impossible. I thought you said you weren't moving anywhere. I changed my mind. Now I live in an apartment on Rue Boulnes. Do you want the address? He confusedly wrote down the new address, asking for the numbers several times. Mom, why didn't you say anything? We could have helped. I didn't need any help. I did it on my own. And the money. Where did you put the money? I spent some of it on a new apartment and put the rest in the bank. Now I have a nice passive income. Oswaldo was silent for so long that I thought I'd lost the connection. Mom, we'll be right there, he said at last. As you wish. I gave him the address. They arrived an hour later. I met them in my new apartment, in my bathrobe and slippers. I wanted to emphasize that I was the boss. Osvaldo looked confused, as if he couldn't believe what was happening. Amelia was pale with anger, but tried to control herself. Aunt Estefania, she began in a sweet voice, we don't understand what has happened. Why did you sell the house in such a hurry? What's not to understand? I answered calmly. You said yourself that the house is too big for one person. But we offered to help with the choice of apartment with the move. I didn't need help. I did everything myself. Amelia looked around the small living room, wrinkling her nose in distaste. But it's so cramped in here, and it's not the right neighborhood. And the money. How much did you get for the house? Enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life. But where's the money? Amelia insisted. I hope you haven't spent it on something you don't need? It's in the bank, with interest. I'll get an income every month. Amelia's face turned completely white. She must have realized that her plans were ruined. Aunt Estefania, that's not wise, she exclaimed, losing her temper. You haven't consulted anyone. This house was a family home, where your grandchildren were to grow up. What grandchildren? I asked. I don't have grandchildren yet. But they will, and they had to leave the family nest. A family nest is built by love, not money. Amelia jumped up from the couch, unable to hold back any longer. It wasn't your house, she screamed. It was Oswaldo's inheritance. You had no right to sell it. How could it not be my house? I was surprised. The house was registered to me and my late husband. When he died, I became sole owner. But you understood that it would go to your son. I didn't realize anything. And I'm not going to die for your plans. Osvaldo tried to calm his wife, but she was furious. You've ruined everything, Amelia screamed. We planned. We were counting on... What were you counting on? I asked in an innocent tone. Amelia faltered, realizing she'd said too much. We were counting on you to be reasonable, she murmured. I did. I sold the house, bought a comfortable apartment, and secured a comfortable old age. Mom, Osvaldo intervened, we were trying to help you. Help you get me to move out, or help me get a guardianship through a lawyer I know. The son turned pale. He must have realized I knew what they were planning. Mom, where did you... It doesn't matter where I came from. What matters is that now I will live by my own rules, not yours. Amelia looked at me with unconcealed hatred. You'll regret your decision, she said through gritted teeth. I don't think so, I said calmly. But you will regret your plans, I promise. They left, slamming the door. Osvaldo tried to say goodbye, but Amelia dragged him away. Left alone, I made tea and sat in Domingo's chair by the window. The apartment was small but cozy, and most importantly, it was mine, bought with my money, where no one could tell me how to live. Outside the window, the life of an ordinary yard was noisy, children playing, neighbors talking, dogs barking. It was not the silence of a big house, but lively sounds that reminded me that life goes on. I had taken the first step toward independence, but it was only the first step. A month of living in a new apartment passed quietly. I was getting used to a different rhythm, settling in, enjoying my independence. Oswaldo didn't call anymore, probably still digesting what had happened. Amelia was silent too, but I knew she wouldn't forgive me for ruining her plans. Genaro came by every day, helping me settle into the new neighborhood. We went to the nearest stores, got to know our neighbors, studied bus schedules. Little by little, the apartment became a home. You see how well it turned out, my friend said, pouring tea in my new kitchen. And it's close to me, and the neighborhood is quiet, and the money is safe. Yes, I agreed. Only one thing bothers me. What's that? Amelia's not the type to just let it go. She'll think of something. Genaro nodded thoughtfully. She probably will, but you're on guard now and the house is sold. What can she do? I don't know, but I have a feeling the story isn't over, and I was right. A week later, Osvaldo called. His voice was strained, formal. Mom, we need to talk. About what? Come to our house tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. Amelia wants to talk things over in a human way. I couldn't believe the sincerity of the invitation, but curiosity got the better of me. Okay, I'll be there. The next evening I went to my son's house. This time I didn't bring gifts or hope for reconciliation. I just wanted to see what they'd come up with. Amelia greeted me with a strained smile. The table was set for 3, smelling of fried chicken. Aunt Estefania, come in, sit down. Let's have dinner and talk quietly. During dinner, the conversation went on about the weather, prices in the stores, neighbors. Amelia was emphatically polite, but there was cold anger in her eyes. After the meal, she pushed her plate away and folded her hands on the table. Aunt Estefania, I've been thinking about our last conversation. I guess I was too emotional. Probably, I agreed. The thing is, Osvaldo and I are very worried about your mental state. In what way? Well, the death of a loved one, stress, loneliness. It all affects your ability to make informed decisions. I realized where this conversation was going, but I decided to listen to the end. Selling the house was a very impulsive thing to do, Amelia continued. No one in their right mind would be in such a hurry to get rid of a family nest egg. I was in my right mind. Of course you were. But grief often clouds the mind. Osvaldo and I consulted a psychologist. What psychologist? Dr. Hernandez at the clinic. He says that at your age, after such a loss, it's common to develop depression with obsessions. Osvaldo was silent, staring at his plate. It was obvious that his wife was the lead in this play. What do you mean by that? I asked. We think you need medical attention. Perhaps psychiatric treatment, medication. I'm mentally healthy. Aunt Estefania, denial of illness is also a symptom. Dr. Hernandez is ready to examine you, run some tests. I got up from the table. This conversation is over. I don't need any doctors. Wait! Amelia got up too. If you refuse voluntary treatment, we'll be forced to go to the proper authorities. What authorities? Social services, the courts. There are procedures for compulsory psychiatric evaluation. So they haven't given up on custody, they've just changed tactics. Now they want to declare me mentally ill. Do whatever you want, I said calmly. I'm going home. Mom, Osvaldo finally spoke up. We're trying to help. I know what you want, and I know how you're going to get it. I walked away, leaving them at a loss. On the way home, I thought about the fact that Amelia won't stop. She's gonna find new ways to get her hands on my money. At home, I called Genaro and told him about the conversation. So now you're mentally ill, my friend summarized grimly. What's going to happen next? They'll try to prove I'm insane. They'll find a compliant doctor, get me compulsory treatment. What are you gonna do? I'm thinking. The next day, I went to see my family doctor, Dr. Moreno. I told him about my sister-in-law's plans, asked him to do a full examination and document my mental state. Estefania, you are perfectly healthy mentally, he assured me after the examination. No signs of depression or cognitive impairment. I will write a detailed report. The doctor's report was detailed and convincing, but I realized that Amelia wouldn't stop at bribing the right specialists. Reflecting on the situation, I remembered my friend's words. The best defense is offense. Maybe I should not only defend, but also attack. Amelia worked as a math teacher at a state university. Public servants must adhere to certain ethical standards, and attempting to illegally seize someone else's property through a fictitious guardianship clearly doesn't fit the image of a model educator. I decided to find out more about how work at the university works. I had an acquaintance, Carmen Reyes, who had been working as a janitor at the same university for over a decade. We met at the health clinic, where we often crossed paths in line to see doctors. Carmen was a simple but observant woman. She knew all the university gossip and was happy to share it. I went to her house on a Thursday evening. Carmen lived in a small apartment near the university, alone. Her husband had died 5 years ago. Her children were grown and gone. "Estefania," she rejoiced. "What are you doing here? Come in, we'll have tea." Over tea, I cautiously started a conversation about the university, about how they treat teachers there, what demands are made of them. "Why, are you interested?" Carmen asked. "Do you want to get a job?" "No, just out of curiosity, do you know the math teacher Amelia Correa?" "Correa?" Carmen's thinking. "Oh, the tall one who always wears suits? Married to a bank teller?" "That's the one. I know her. She's puffed up, important. She says hello to me through her lip like I'm her servant." "How do her coworkers treat her?" "It varies. Students don't like her. They say she's very picky. And colleagues, well, she's still young. She's only been working for a few years. She's trying to prove herself a serious scientist." Carmen poured more tea and leaned toward me confidentially. "Why are you interested in this one? Didn't you have a fight with her?" I decided to tell part of the truth. "She's my son's wife. We're having a conflict over family matters." "Oh, I see." Carmen nodded understandingly. "Mother-in-law and daughter-in-law are rarely friends. What kind of conflict?" I told her about their attempts to get me to sell the house without mentioning the overheard conversation or the custody plans. "What a bitch," Carmen said. "She's stealing other people's stuff. Did you sell it in the end?" "I did, but it was my own decision, not theirs. I did the right thing. I don't like that daughter-in-law of yours. She's always so calculating and cold. And at university she acts like she's the smartest." We talked some more, and I learned some interesting details about university life. It turns out that the dean of the mathematics department, Dr. Felipe Aguilar, was a man of the old school, very demanding to the moral image of his staff. "Aguilar is a tough guy," Carmen said. "If a teacher does something wrong, he immediately calls on the carpet. He has a principle. A teacher must be an example in everything. And what kind of misdemeanors does he not forgive?" "All kinds. I remember one teacher was fired for drunken scandalizing in the street, another for taking money from students for grades. Aguilar believes the university is a temple of science, not a retail store. That's interesting. A man with principles like that is unlikely to approve of an employee trying to illegally take property." "When do they hold department meetings?" I asked as if by accident. "On Wednesdays in the afternoon, usually at 3 o'clock in the dean's office. All teachers gather, discuss curricula, various organizational issues. Are outsiders allowed in there?" "Why do you ask?" Carmen looked at me suspiciously. "Just curious. They don't, of course. The meetings are closed. But if you really need to, you can ask the dean for an appointment. He sees visitors every day from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock. We sat there till late afternoon. Carmen told me university news, and I memorized useful information. I was particularly interested in Amelia's schedule. It turned out that on Wednesdays she had lectures from morning until 2 o'clock, and then a department meeting. As I left, I asked Carmen, "If you find out anything interesting about my sister-in-law, tell me. I want to know who I'm dealing with." "Of course, dear. I'll keep my ears open." At home, I thought about it for a long time. A plan was slowly forming in my head. If Amelia wanted to play dirty, let her know I had trump cards too. Over the next week, I gathered more information about the university and Dean Aguilar personally. I found out that he was a professor with 30 years of experience, the author of several textbooks, a man of impeccable reputation. He was known in the city as a strict but fair leader. I also learned that the university takes ethical standards very seriously. Teachers sign a code of professional ethics, pledging to be a model of decency for students. Tuesday night, I got a call from Carmen. "Estefania, I have news about your sister-in-law." "What news?" "Tomorrow they're having a department meeting, and Aguilar will be announcing the results of the faculty evaluations. Your Amelia was recertified this year." "So?" "So, if she does well, she'll get a promotion and a raise. She's already telling everyone what her plans are for the bonus money. It's perfect. Tomorrow, Amelia will be in high spirits, looking forward to her promotion. It's time to surprise her." Wednesday morning, I got ready in style. I put on my best suit, the one I wore to formal events with Domingo. I had my hair done at the barber shop, a little makeup. I wanted to look respectable and imposing. In my purse, I put Dr. Moreno's report on my mental health, copies of the sale of my house, and a bank statement on my escrow account. If I needed to prove my competency, I'd have all the documents at my fingertips. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I arrived at the university. The building was impressive, an old building with columns and high windows. The mathematics department was located on the second floor. I found the dean's office easily. The door had a sign that read, Dr. Felipe Aguilar, Dean of the Faculty of Mathematics. The door was ajar and voices could be heard inside. I knocked and entered. In the office at a large desk sat a man of about 55, wearing glasses and an austere suit. Around the desk were 7 other people, faculty members from the department. Amelia was among them. "I'm sorry to interrupt," I said. "May I come in?" The dean looked up from his papers. "We're in the middle of a department meeting. Who are you here to see?" "For you, Dr. Aguilar. My name is Estefania Valdivia. I need to tell you about the behavior of one of your employees." Amelia turned pale when she recognized me. The other faculty members looked at the unexpected visitor with curiosity. "Señora Valdivia," the dean said, "if you have a complaint about a faculty member, you need to make an appointment. This is not a good time." "Dr. Aguilar, what I'm about to say applies to everyone here. It's about ethics and the reputation of the university." The dean frowned, but gestured for me to sit in the empty chair. "Okay, I'm listening. But keep it brief." I sat down, put my purse on my lap, and looked around at the crowd. Amelia sat still, as if petrified. "Dr. Aguilar, dear colleagues," I began in a calm voice. "My name is Estefania Valdivia. I am the mother of the bank employee Osvaldo Valdivia and mother-in-law of your employee Amelia Correa." Amelia twitched, but remained silent. "I came here to tell you about how your colleague tried to deprive me of my right to dispose of my own property in order to illegally seize it." The office became very quiet. The dean put aside his pen and looked at me carefully. "This is a serious accusation, Señora. Are you sure you know what you're saying?" "Absolutely sure. After my husband died 2 months ago, Señora Correa began forcing me to sell the family home and move into a small apartment." I spoke calmly, without emotion, as if I were being questioned in court. I described the first hints at the wake, the persistent entreaties with calculations in a notebook, the threats on the last visit. "At first, I thought they really cared about my well-being," I continued. "But then I overheard their conversation, in which Señora Correa and her husband discussed plans to force custody of me." Amelia jumped up from her seat. "It's a lie!" she exclaimed. "She's making it up." "Sit down, Señora Correa," the dean said sternly. "Let the visitor finish." Amelia sat down, but continued to shake her head indignantly. "In that conversation," I continued, "your employee called me a stubborn old woman, saying that through a lawyer she knew, a limited guardianship could be arranged that would allow her to dispose of my property." "Prove it," Amelia shouted. "Where's the proof?" "The proof is in the events that followed." After that conversation, Señora Correa really tried to put her plan into action. I took out of my purse a certificate from Dr. Moreno. "This is my attending physician's report that I am completely competent and mentally healthy. The date is yesterday." The dean took the certificate and read it carefully. "And here are the documents that I sold my house and bought an apartment on my own." I put copies of the contracts on the table. "As you can see, there are no signs of inadequacy in my actions." One of the teachers, an elderly man with a gray beard, shook his head. "If this is true, then the behavior of a colleague is unacceptable." "It's not true!" Amelia shrieked again. "She had twisted everything. We were really worried about her mental state. We wanted to help." "Help take possession of my house worth 450 million pesos?" I asked. "Very noble help." The figure made an impression. Several faculty members looked at each other. "Dr. Aguilar," I turned to the dean, "I understand that this is an internal affair of our family, but Señora Correa works at a state university, educates young people, and sets an example for students. Do you think it is acceptable for a math professor to plan custody fraud?" The dean was silent, mulling over what he had heard. His face grew increasingly grim. "Señora Correa," he finally said, "what do you have to say in your defense?" "It's all slander." Amelia was on the verge of hysterics. She's taking revenge on me for trying to talk some sense into her. An old woman who lost her husband can't make rational decisions. So you confirm that you tried to force your mother-in-law to sell the house? The dean clarified. We were trying to help her, to explain that a big house is not for one person. And the talk about custody? Amelia hesitated. We consulted with a lawyer about options to help an elderly person. So there was indeed talk of guardianship? But not for the purpose of taking possession of the property, for the purpose of helping. The dean got up from his desk and strode around the office. Senora Correa, even if we accept your version, it is against the law to attempt to execute a guardianship against the will of a person who is officially recognized as legally capable. I haven't broken any laws. Not yet. But you were planning to. And for a university professor, it's not enough not to break the law. You have to be morally impeccable. The dean returned to his desk and looked at his colleagues. Would anyone like to speak on this matter? An elderly faculty member with a beard raised his hand. Dr. Aguilar, if the facts presented are true, the colleague's behavior is unethical. A faculty member cannot plan actions to limit the rights of others for personal gain. What personal gain? Amelia was indignant. A house worth 450 million pesos, the colleague reminded her. If your mother-in-law had sold it under your compulsion and then died, your husband would have inherited it, and therefore you would inherit it. Another teacher, a young woman, also spoke up. Amelia, even if your intentions were good, your methods are unacceptable. You can't force people to make decisions they don't want to make. The dean nodded. Senora Valdivia, thank you for the information. We will deal with this situation. Wait, I said. I want to add one more detail. Go ahead. Yesterday, Senora Correa invited me to her house and offered me a compulsory psychiatric evaluation. If I refused, she threatened to take me to court to declare me incompetent. Amelia turned even paler. That's not true. Your husband was present during this conversation. If necessary, he will confirm what I said. Senora Correa, said the dean sternly, these are direct threats. Do you realize the seriousness of the accusation? Amelia remained silent, realizing that the situation was catastrophic. Colleagues, the dean addressed the faculty, please leave the room. I need to speak to Senora Correa alone. The faculty began to pack up. As they left, they cast judgmental glances at Amelia. Her reputation was irretrievably ruined. Senora Valdivia, the dean said when the three of us were alone, thank you very much for bringing this information to our attention. The university cannot tolerate unethical behavior by employees. What will happen to Senora Correa? That is an internal university matter, but I can tell you that the consequences will be severe. I got up, gathered my papers, and headed for the door. Goodbye, Dr. Aguilar. I hope there won't be any more occasions to see you. Goodbye, Senora Valdivia. As I left the office, I heard the dean start talking to Amelia in a stern voice. Senora Correa, explain to me how a faculty member of our university could plan such actions. I walked down the stairs and out of the building. It was sunny and warm outside. A sense of accomplishment filled my soul with a pleasant lightness. Amelia had gotten what she deserved. Now she would learn what it meant to face the consequences of her actions, and I'd finally gotten my revenge for all the humiliation and threats. Carmen called this evening. Estefania, the whole university is buzzing. Your sister-in-law has been called to the dean's office. Yeah? What about her? They say Aguilar gave her a real beating. And then she walked out of the office with a letter of resignation. She quit? Uh-huh. The alternative was worse. A reprimand and a letter of resignation. At least I got a clean employment history. I hung up the phone with a sense of satisfaction. Amelia had paid for her greed and meanness. Now she will have to look for a new job to explain the reasons for dismissal from the previous place. And I will live in peace in my apartment, spend money as I see fit, and not be afraid that someone will try to deprive me of my freedom of choice. Justice has been served.